I think all the participants are put on mute so that the discussion goes smoothly. In case anybody has any questions, we really encourage you to put them in the chat box. We will consolidate the same and we will try to answer as much as possible within the time slot that we have. So with that out of the way, before we look at the data and dive in, I would like to tell all of you about one person, Jaya Bai. She could be an embodiment of many others as well as we hear what I'm about to say. So Jaya Bai lives in the Kuntigrama locality in Bangalore, and she has been working in and has been engaged in the sorting and segregation of e-waste in her husband's scrap shop for as long as she can remember. But in doing this activity, little did she know that the cracked phone, the broken CPU, and the tangled wires had contained materials and minerals which are sought after the world over. And she definitely did not know that she is an integral part of this ecosystem, and she can earn a respectable income only if she had the necessary opportunity to actively participate in the value chain. Today, I hope through these conversations and insights, we can change that reality. So with that, I invite my colleague and the Director for Climate Action at PCI, Shishir Kumar Singh, to set the context for the discussions that are going to ensue. Shishir, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shruti, and good morning to everyone, all the participants and the speakers and panelists. And thank you so much, Dhenuka, for joining in. Thank you so much, Professor Kalyan, for facilitating and organizing this consultation, which is anyway need of the hour. So just a quick, I'll be very brief because I know a lot of time is to be devoted for the consultation. So as Shruti said, I look after the climate and sustainability initiatives at PCI India. For those who don't know about PCI India, we are a not-for-profit organization, and we primarily work with the marginalized population, the government stakeholders, and the corporates, basically to identify what are the grassroots challenges and then design and implement scalable solutions which can address those challenges. Well, keeping in line with this philosophy, basically we conceptualized this initiative. And when we started, we did not begin with a perfect blueprint. We began with certain set of assumptions. And one of those core assumptions was that engaging women as entrepreneurs could actually help shift e-waste from informal, unsafe practices into the more formal and compliant systems. And at that time, it was a hypothesis. It was not a certainty at that time. And we knew that the biggest challenge in the e-waste was not the absence of rules or recyclers or other value chain actors. It was basically the last mile connectivity, where the e-waste is getting generated, stored, and informally getting handled. We believed that if we wanted to influence that last mile, we needed actors who could actually operate with trust and accountability. And that is where we brought women in. Our early thinking was that women who positioned not just as workers, but also as micro entrepreneurs, they could play a very different role within the system, not merely collecting the material from the sites, but they can also help in organizing the flows, maintaining the standards, required standards as per the guidelines, and also building that kind of credibility within the household where they are working in. And another assumption was that if we engage women formally into the e-waste value chain, it will not only improve the system performance, but it will also improve their dignity, agency, and also increase their income. Women who are moving from the margins of the informal handling into the recognized and the compliant enterprises, they are now actually perceiving the change, how they are being perceived how they are being seen in the society. And we began piloting this approach. As we began this, certain things became very clear. The first was women were able to unlock the access, not only to the homes where the e-waste was lying in, but also to the small offices, clinics, local business shops. And these are the spaces where you'll often see that e-waste is lying unused for years because disposal feels risky or complicated. And women-led enterprises are now becoming, or they will become, a trusted interface, which will help these entities to engage the formal systems without any fear or confusion. Second thing, we saw that women who brought in the strong health and safety lens into the work. And that was not accidental. We at PCI India, we are implementing multiple programs around health and nutrition, around livelihoods with these women. And around all that work that we have implemented in the last more than 2 decades, we have consistently observed that when women understand the risk, they take it very seriously. And with the right kind of training and equipments and tools, safety norms are not only treated, they are not just treated as an external imposition, but they become a part of the business. Now, this observation has also been backed by the recent certain reports which have come into the light. I think in the recent work which has been done by the United Nations Environmental Program in 2025, that has demonstrated that women in the waste sector, if they are provided training and safety equipment, they demonstrate more consistent safety practices. And they also bring greater discipline and traceability into the waste systems. Equally, we are also seeing that tangible shifts in women's own economic and social standing through this initiative. Income is becoming more stable, their work is becoming more visible, they are getting recognized for the work that they are doing. And they are no longer peripheral actors in the risky and this informal chain. Now they are becoming entrepreneurs, which are linked to the formal recyclers and also ensuring that there are compliant systems in place. And the most important thing for us is that women entrepreneurship, it's not just improving the livelihood, it is improving the system behavior across this e-waste value chain. It is improving how the material is getting handled. It is improving how the risks are getting managed. It is also improving how the trust is being built between the informal actors and the formal value chains which are now getting created across. And it also improves how women are being positioned within the economy itself. So I'm happy that today we are talking about engaging women in e-waste through the Naari Circuit initiative, which Shruti will obviously talk about. And we are not talking about assumptions. We are seeing that there are evidences which are getting created. So now we are talking about proven pathways. So lastly, I just want to acknowledge our partnership with the ABB and specifically Ms. Dhenuka to trust us with this kind of initiative, because it takes vision and willingness to experiment, to support an idea which has started with certain hypothesis and is evolving into a more learning and then evidence based initiative. So we are deeply grateful to Ms. Dhenuka, who is sharing the risk with us and is backing women as entrepreneurs in this evolving value chain. And I'm also very thankful to Professor Kalyan Bhaskar, who has become a part of this particular journey that we have undertaken last year. And I'm looking forward to the consultation, hearing from all of you folks who have joined from academic institutions, from the corporates, from the government stakeholders. I welcome you all and looking forward to the consultation. Thank you so much. Back to you, Shruti.
Thank you for that, Shishir. So I think I will quickly talk about Naari Circuit. I think you see that on our screens, and it's something that Shishir also mentioned. So we at PCI wanted to create an inclusive last mile approach to building a circular economy that leaves no one behind. And with the support of ABB, we had an opportunity to make Naari Circuit a reality. So, Naari Circuit is a collective of 250 women, predominantly from the waste picking communities in Bangalore, who are supported through concentrated efforts in setting up and scaling formal collection and refurbishment enterprises that safely manage electronic waste in the city. So, with the support of ABB, this project essentially has a threefold objective. One is to enhance responsibility in safely disposing of e-waste. Two, sorry, the slide came in a little bit late. Shruti, can you move to slide 3, please? Um, Yes, thank you. So, one is, like I was saying, to enhance customer responsibilities to ensure that there is safe disposal of e waste. Two, increase the agency of women through targeted capacity building and establishing of enterprises. And three, finally, to build formal linkages that not only offer a means for improved material extraction, but ultimately sustain and scale these enterprises, thereby increasing individual and household incomes. So, in the last 1 year of our work in the city, we have identified close to 260 women. Shruti, can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah. We have offered capacity building trainings which cover both entrepreneurial and a technical understanding to all of these women. We've established 6 collection centers which have cumulatively collected close to 3,529 kgs in the last 6 months. And we've also initiated a few awareness drives with colleges, government offices, apartments, and in residential colonies, which have engaged close to 1,500 citizens. So, our efforts have enabled us to understand that women from informal waste ecosystems can successfully operate enterprises within the formal e waste value chain, and decentralized, community embedded collection models improve channelization of e waste to authorized recyclers, and citizen engagement is critical for responsible disposal. This is a proof of concept, but it is also a proof of how much further we can go and how much there is to achieve. Our dialogues today are focused on gaining insights which not only translate this success into long term viability, but also enable livelihoods of women who are waiting to claim their space in this ecosystem. With that, I would like to invite Ms. Dhenuka, the AVP for Environment and Sustainability Affairs at ABB India, to share the industry perspective and help us understand how they are looking at this. So, with that, Ms. Dhenuka, over to you.
Thank you, Shruti. Thank you, PCI and esteemed colleagues. I think have great kind of expectation from this project. I'm delighted that such a important stakeholder engagement connect is happening now with the industry leaders plus academia. From ABB, Shishir very clearly mentioned that he thanks for the risk-taking ability of having a project of this nature. For the benefit of larger audience, would like to mention that this is something that we've taken under a corporate social responsibility budgeting and allocation, and it took a lot of effort to curate a program where there could be a piloting angle to it, go a little bolder in terms of strategic interest for companies like us as well. As you know, there have been so many recent regulations in terms of addressing EPR, extended product responsibility, talking about e-waste, reach ROHS compliances. So the whole concept about having something that is meaningful, that involves women. Women in India are in the informal sector in terms of waste management and processing. So if you're looking at e-waste is a little bit on the higher end in terms of giving financial returns, because there are products that can be extracted from e-waste that can yield a certain amount of financial model for them to work with. Having said that, it's very complicated from a community angle. I think PCI would be able to better describe on the challenges on ground. But for what is it for companies like ABB, we've always wanting to look at from an extended supply or a vendor chain, how do you integrate common issues that you deal with, be it women, workforce, vendors who are led by women enterprises, and also from bottom of the pyramid who can make a livelihood opportunity in the waste as a sector. So I think it's a win-win engagement for us in terms of piloting this initiative, because it addresses gender and diversity from the community angle. It talks about e-waste as a big area of focus for companies like us who struggle to identify right vendors who are typically in the, in fact, we've been trying to talk to Pollution Control Board and see how do you empower more and more smaller enterprises so that they are ready to be certified as registered vendors at Pollution Control Board to handle certain types of specific waste. Typically, if you look at the vendor pipeline, it's also quite complex. There are amounts of financial stability required. There are a lot of compliance requirements which are which essentially is required both from the pollution control board or the government entities perspective, plus corporates like us who look at standardized vendor onboarding process. So we are like looking at a complete end-to-end model, and hopefully if Naari circuit a couple of years down the line is successful, we'll have women enterprises who are recognized, who have the compliance requirement, who have the bandwidth. And I think happy to share that ABB and other corporates like us would be happy to onboard vendors, and there is a complete cycle of thought process in terms of empowering local employability, diversity, and also handling critical waste. With that, I hand over to PCI, and looking forward to understanding the challenges, plus what can be better managed in the sector as a whole, as well as the thought process from academia on where the landscape is looking forward to in terms of handling informal sector, specifically on the pipeline for companies like ABB. Thank you, Shruti and PCI team, for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Dhenuka. I'm sure all of us are eagerly waiting for what we came here and signed up for, the consultation and the conversations from our esteemed panel. So, Ritika, over to you to quickly introduce our wonderful speakers today, and then we can get started.
You're on mute, Ritika. No, we can't hear
We
you.
can't hear you.
Is it better?
Yeah, no, this is better.
Nice. I was just saying that I prepared a lot of stuff to introduce, but I think I had to keep it short. So thank you for this opportunity, Shruti, PCI, and Kalyan sir, for having me here and to introduce our panelists. So I'll start with introducing and welcoming on board Mr. Ravi Karnan, who is an IS officer and commissioner of the Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. He's a 2012 batch IS officer and leads one of the India's most largest municipal administration, overseeing sanitation systems and urban waste management, and handling nearly 7,800 tons of waste daily. Then we have Dr. Sandip Chatterjee, who is a senior advisor at Sustainable Electronics Recycling International, SERI, in India, and a veteran policy expert in sustainable electronics. He has also worked as senior director and scientist at G level at METI Government of India, and have played a pivotal role in translating research into national electronics and sustainability policies. Then we have met Ms. Dhenuka Srinivasan, who is a senior ESG and climate advisory expert with over 25 years of experience in sustainability, carbon markets, and policy frameworks. We have Pranshu Singhal, who is the founder and CEO of Karu Sambhav and a recognized global leader in responsible resource management. He brings over 25 years of experience, including leadership roles at Microsoft and Nokia. He has also conferred the Social Entrepreneur of the Year 2021 in India by the World Economic Forum. We have Satish Sinha, who is the Associate Director of Toxic Links and a senior voice in environmental policy and advocacy in India. With over 2 decades of experience in toxic links and a major prior service in the Indian Air Force, he has led critical work on municipal hazardous and e-waste management policy with strong engagement in India's informal recycling sector. We also have Miss Priti Mahesh, who is an environmental consultant and waste management specialist with over 20 years of experience in sustainability and social inclusion. Her work advances gender responsive and livelihood centered approaches in e waste, plastics, and chemicals management, strengthening both the environmental outcomes and equitable participation in the circular value chains. We have then Miss Priyanka Porwal, who is the founder and director of Paripatram Solutions and a practitioner of inclusive circular economy. Her work is mostly led in the national e-waste awareness and skill development initiatives, and worked extensively to integrate informal workers into formal waste management systems. Then we have Dr. Deepali Sinha Khetriwal, who is a leading e-waste researcher and practitioner at the founder of EcoWork. With a doctoral degree from the University of St. Gallen, she has worked extensively across India and Europe on e-waste management systems, forecasting, and capacity development initiatives under UN-supported platforms. Then one of not the least, but our last panelist, Dr. Anwesha Borthakur, who is an interdisciplinary researcher specializing in e-waste and textile waste governance. Currently, she is a research scientist at Technical University of Munich and a former Humboldt and Marie Curie Fellow. Her work provides comparative policy insights across India, South Africa, and European Union. To facilitate our today's consultation, we have our moderator, Professor Kalyan Bhaskar, who is a faculty member at XLRI. With his deep expertise in sustainability, governance, and responsible business, he brings strong academic insight and industry engagement to guide his consultation on inclusive and future-ready e-waste ecosystems for SHG women. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritika. Thank you so much, Shruti and Sishir. And let me, I think, give a introduction of you, Ritika. So Ritika dons many hats. In one of the hats, she is a student of the CSR program, postgraduate certificate program in CSR leadership at XLRI. So in a way, she's my student. But in a way, she's also a friend and collaborator. She has her own sustainability ESG advisory firm. And she has a lot of passion about sustainability. And I think she has been helping us with this project. Thank you so much for giving that backdrop. And I think today being the last day of the AI Summit in India, it's a good backdrop for us to have discussions on this. In the AI Summit also, a lot of discussions happened on critical minerals. All those panels and servers and everything would require critical minerals. This year started with all the discussion around Greenland and the race for critical minerals in Greenland. So I think it's pertinent for us to have this discussion around this with such eminent panelists who are experts on e-waste management, circularity, not just in India, but globally. So globally, so I think it's a good thing. So the purpose, so let me give a brief backdrop of the purpose of these workshops. As part of this project that is funded by ABB CSR initiative, the idea is to have 6 women-driven enterprises being set up, essentially women-run and women-led enterprises. That's the idea, of which 3 enterprises have been set up and 3 more are to be set up. And the groundwork is done by Shruti and her team in Bangalore. The idea behind these 2 workshops, we have to have 2 workshops here. This is the inaugural workshop to be done in the initial part of the part. We will have another workshop towards the end of this project, maybe about 6 months from now, where the focus of that workshop will be different. This work is essentially held to gain an understanding from these experts as these firms are being set up, these women-driven enterprises. What are those insights which might help these firms being set up? So essentially from a firm's perspective and from an ecosystem perspective. So we have some broad line of discussions, the theme question that has been shared with the panelists. And essentially the way this webinar will be structured is, we'll be having those discussions around those lead points around a firm perspective and from an ecosystem perspective. And I'll invite the panelists to come and share their perspective. And everyone else who is joined in as an audience and others, they should feel free to engage with the panelists. And if there are any perspectives, thoughts, to put that on the chat box. Ritika and Shruti will help us then direct those to the respective panelists. Yeah, so I think from a firm perspective, let us get started from a firm perspective. And I think here, let me bring in Pranshu first, if you can. Pranshu being who has donned multiple hats, both at the producer level and now running his own firm, which has gone through multiple stages for the last 10 years. So maybe we start with now as these firms have been set up, Pranshu, the 3 firms, and as more firms will be set up, what are those some insights based on your a decade of experience running a firm? What are some of those insights in which they can perhaps stay flexible and to switch between different ways to manage this? How do they sustain themselves?
Thank you, Bhaskar. Thank you, Kalyan. So, let's talk of the 3 buckets of circular economy, or in any sector. Specifically, here we are talking about e-waste. The very first is on collection systems, and that has been the biggest challenge, not just in India but at a global level. And the initiatives which have been taken, like the one mentioned by PCI team, are a way to kind of enhance that, because at the end of the day, waste is there and it is being generated in very large quantums every single day. More and more convergence of products is happening. People are consuming more, purchasing power parity is increasing, products are getting cheaper. So there are so many dimensions which are allowing very, very wide dispersion of products. But while it is super easy to distribute products, it's almost impossible to collect them. But there are no systems. Today you have 10-minute delivery for anything, but you have not even a year take back system. So if you want to figure out, how do I get a product back, there's really nothing. The whole system was kind of being given an impetus by e-waste tools in the first avatar. However, the recent versions and I have kind of really changed that scenario. So one of the biggest challenges that I see for most enterprises or people who are considering setting up, whether it's a small enterprise or a cooperative sort of a model or a dismantling unit or repairs, is please don't rely on regulations as the baseline. For me, that is the biggest learning, actually. And this was fundamentally being told to me when I was creating Karosumov as an organization, that this is a very this is an organization which is highly dependent on how rules function. And what we have seen almost every second year is that rules disrupt dramatically the businesses which are being set. Right from the first version to the second version, for example, the version which came in 2022 took away the dialogue on collection systems, which is the very fundamental reason why you need to have rules in the first place, because recycling is still a business. Collection is no business, actually. It's a cost. And the idea that waste is wealth has also, I believe, contributed to this very wrong assumption that too much money is to be made. I mean, people who have worked at a grassroots level, everyone understands that when you are picking a product, you are picking anything. You're not just, cherry picking a specific device and leaving something else. And essentially, when we talk of material circularity, we are looking at devices which are completely dead and broken. So they have no value from a component extraction or reuse point of view. They have no value from a refurbishment point of view. They have only material value. So I see a whole range of challenges. What are required is initiatives like the ones that have been discussed. We have been working on similar initiatives in the past, but the problem which emerged after 2022 was no one wanted to finance. All the brands who were financing such initiatives, because government took away the need of setting up collection systems, almost all brands backed off, barring one or two. I will not, those are exceptions. But there is really no finance. So the only way now left is to look at CSR. But then again, CSR is not a long-term solution for these things. It's a one-time grant, milestone based. So, and these sort of systems require perpetual support. So for me, the biggest challenge is how to create these models if regulations keep on changing, without even giving businesses any timeline to rethink. And why do they change? Honestly, no one knows. There is a big debate. For example, a new system is being introduced in few months' time, and that takes away the very core of traceability and transparency in the ecosystem. So who is doing what is also being made translucent, or opaque. So we have to really rethink, the big challenge is these systems need to function with zero dependency on rules. So for me, that's the biggest learning.
Okay. Thank you so much, Pranshu, for sharing that. And I think when you were sharing, and I think more than once you talked about the risk due to sudden shift in regulations and policy. At management students, we talk to students that how do you, at a firm level, analyze the external environment. And one of the framework we talk about is the PESTEL one, where political, economic, social, technologically. So I think the political, the policy shift, the legal one, I think that's beautifully, I think, brought out. So I'll come back to you, but maybe I'll also maybe now invite Deepika. Deepika, since you also have done multiple hats, and now with EcoWork, you have tried to bridge that gap between the informal and the formal sector. If you can share some experience on sustaining these enterprises.
Thanks, Kalyan, and great to see all the interest in this topic. It's something that I've been working on for about 20, 21 years now. It's I think, moved from being a very marginal, fringe, unknown kind of topic to becoming very mainstream. Of course, a lot has been driven by the regulations, but I totally agree with Pranshu that this is something that it's such a dynamic landscape because it's new territory. We've not done this for any other waste stream before, so it's kind of learning and doing. But it's very challenging that the laws and the rules and the expectations are changing without any evidence, right? And what we started with was the idea that okay, you need to have good collection, you need to have good sorting, dismantling, and do this in a safe and proper way. And for this, to just tell the informal sector, oh, stop doing what you are and change your behavior, change your approach, is difficult if you don't have an alternative. So that was the origin of eco work, where we said let's create the space and let's give them the support on actually doing that. How can you work in a space that has compliance, that is able to support you with doing the right practices, etc. But we realized very quickly that once the rules changed and there was no requirement for collection centers, for dismantlers, to be doing this in a kind of compliant facility. It was only between producers and recyclers, in the latest version of the rules. There was absolutely no need for these kind of, setups or infrastructure, right? So, uh, the focus is going very, very much on just the materials and just the precious metals from a regulatory perspective, ignoring all these other aspects. Definitely not looking at the social side, definitely ignoring the environmental side also. And this is something that always comes out in my discussions is, why are these four metals, which are the most valuable of them, right? Copper, aluminum, gold, even iron, I mean, because of the volume, they already have a market. They're already driven by economics. Where we need to focus EPR funds, where we need to focus CSR energy, etc., is for those that are not financed, that are being lost because there is no money to be made. And collection, dismantling, treatment is a cost. Everyone, I keep telling this as well. Waste, to recover that wealth also costs money. It costs time, it costs energy, it costs transport, it costs labor. It does not happen automatically. And if you look at the price of a product versus the intrinsic material value, which is all this gold and silver and plastic and whatever, it doesn't add up to the cost and the effort it takes to collect it. So for eco work, we try to do this in a shared economy kind of way, where we said okay, we can distribute some of those costs, we can aggregate some of those volumes to reach those economies of scale. But because of the market dynamics and kind of the regulatory environment, it's impossibly challenging to actually make it happen, because you're incompliant or non-compliant at some point or the other because of the way the regulations are. That's been our experience, at least.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think a lot of things resonated with Pranshu, but couple of new interesting points you brought in. But here, since both of you talked about the role of policies, I think next I would be going to two speakers who come from a government and policy background. One of our speakers has to drop off early, so I will go to him, Karnan sir, the Commissioner of Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. So, Kannan sir, if you're there, if you can just, since the initial remarks have come on the role of policies and regulations and the risk they pose to business. So, if you can share your perspectives on this topic and the way you have been navigating that in Hyderabad, it would be great for us to hear. Yeah. Shruti, Kannan sir has asked to let him speak.
Just checking.
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah. Sir, you should be able to now.
Yeah, thank you then. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone on the board to raise this topic here. It's a very pertinent one to discuss about it today. The way we are collecting e-waste, I can tell you from my example and for part of Hyderabad Municipal Commissioner, we did a special drive for 2 days as part of Sankranti. here the tradition in entire Telugu state, before Sankranti, like we call it Bogi, they do clean the entire houses and they do throw away all the waste kept in the households. So we did a special drive for that aspect. The 2 days we generate around 90 metric tons of waste. And we used our self-help group in this way. The correct is like Naari Shakti connectivity also part of this one. So we use them in a big way, and we have motivated them to bring all their e-waste deposit in a particular place. We call this RR center, like recycling and resource centers. So where we try to motivate them in a big way to do that. So that way, I personally feel is any local body, whether it's a rural, urban, local body, it is their primary responsibility to collect the e-waste, and it's their primary responsibility to sort out the e-waste and send to a proper recycling center. Like luckily in Hyderabad, we have our own recycling unit also at Dindukal airport, nearby airport base. So there we also whatever e-waste we generate, we segregate. We try to get the even the value metals from them. So my request from my side and my suggestion from my side is about when we are involving the woman in this one, let us be a very good incentive for them also. It's about about the kabaddi wala. They'll get some good incentives when they give their clothes or paper to them or some other newspapers to them like that. Some incentive also back to this one. So that's the most important thing. And some aggregators are coming up so that we can create a market mechanism. So they will collect different sources, whether from a regular kabaddi wala or they're from the woman also. So that way we can ensure that the e-waste generated in the households. Of course, the e-waste generated in the bulk generators like software companies or like hardware companies or electrical companies, that is different. We can easily source them at a single point. But e-waste generated each household is also huge potential for them to take care of this one. So that is from my side. We should ensure that especially they think it's a part of the job and it's a mandate also. So whatever waste generated, we try to process it. Why will not try to process the e-waste generated within our city, within our local body? So that also my request from my side. And most of the local bodies have their own self-help groups. They provide them livelihoods. They provide them all the support to the women in the city who are recognized as a part of self-help group. Even every city is having it. So my request is as a part of this involving women in their recycling part. The collection, we should have put an incentive mechanism, and we should also involve the market forces come into play, and especially some aggregator. They'll try to collect from the city ward level or zone level or division level, so that it'll be like a win-win for everyone. So the waste will not accumulate in their houses, and waste will not go to the regular waste. It's difficult to separate when the waste goes with the regular waste. So that all the challenges we faces. My request to the important participants here, please think in that angle that municipal authority or any local body, they think it is their right. It is a part of the mandate to ensure that collection of e-waste should be done in a proper way and it will segregate in a proper way and involve the local self-help group movements so that it will be like win-win for everyone. This is from my side.
Thank you so much, Karnan sir. And I think Shruti, it would be good for the project also to get insights from the initiatives done in Hyderabad and what insights we can bring in here. But he mentioned about the role of urban local bodies. I'll come to that. But since we are on the topic of policies and policy posing a risk and regulations, so let me join in you, Sandip sir here, too. And since we have seen policies, so we have seen a period when there were no policies here in India. Then you have seen the policies being framed and then being revised again and again. And now it's a very different trajectory of the policies. So how do you look at that evolution over 20 years and perhaps how it shapes or poses a risk to the firms that manage e-waste?
Thank you, Kalyan. Actually, if you see, as Pranshu mentioned, Deepali also mentioned, we have gone almost 1.5 decade or 2 decade for experimenting on policy side and making a rule out of it. But to my mind, as Niti Aayog mentioned a few years back, that this subject should be addressed from a particular ministry. But in our country, some of the parts have been handled by MOEF, manufacturing pushing from our ministry, Ministry of Electronics and IT. And now you have seen that critical mineral extraction subsidy was offered by Ministry of Mines. So this is a diverse focus, I should say, and there is no coherent policy, because if you see Ministry of Electronics and IT come out with various type of manufacturing promotion scheme like PLI, specs, MCIB and all. There, if you require to introduce certain circular economy policy like green design, longer life of the product, all those things could not be taken because it is not priority of our ministry. We generally talk about the whole of government approach, but it never happens. So this is one drawback I should mention. Second point I should mention, electronic waste management has been changed. Internationally, if you see, we cannot manage electronic waste once it is already been developed. So the design is the one of the important thing, and after the design, longer life of the product has to be seen carefully. There also women will be creating a important role after collection. We do not have to segregate. You should see if there is a usable life is there or not. We should distinguish between end of use and end of life. There is a at least 9 to 10 years life is still there. Third thing I should mention, e-waste management, along with the very recent development in the country, DPDP Act, that is Digital Data Protection Act, where personal data is available in this product required to be sanitized. Otherwise, the fine is significant amount like 250 crores. So whoever is handling that product, that is also could be vulnerable. The data sanitation, so segregation should be the another last part before recycling. So these are the initial things. So since our ministry is generating the product, data is also our subject. The end of life management should be also transferred to the Ministry of Electronics and IT to coherently deal the matter, so that circular economy push can be actually realized in the country. Because then I should mention the role of course, ULB local body, because many of the big ULB, including Hyderabad, may have a very structured mechanism to have some collection with the various recyclers or PROs, the collection mechanism, but still at the different pockets of small businesses, informal units, you cannot collect those material. And the proper skill also would be important. And finally, it is always better to ship them in a particular cluster where you can train appropriately and have a automated separation system so that plastics and metal can be segregated properly. And also some of the CRM, critical mineral rich component and rare earth component can be segregated better, sorted better using technology. Those things also should be factored in an entire ecosystem, so that resource efficiency and the output of recyclers and the material value can be realized properly. So these are the many unfinished agenda in the policy base I am highlighting.
Thank you so much, Sandip sir. I think but the first point was the missing of whole of government approach and the piecemeal approach. The second was the importance of designing products and designing for environment, essentially the DFE approach. And the third was to the on the end of use, not being the end of life, and especially on that. In fact, if I connect this to what Deepali mentioned, how e-waste, the narrative has changed. Now, if I recall 20 years back when the initial first set of reports were coming out, the focus was more on the health aspects of informal sector, open burning, the environmental aspects. And I think that is how the narrative was for the first 10 years. But post-COVID, especially, the I think it has been completely changed with resources and critical minerals and manufacturing and everything. So now suddenly the environment and social narrative seems to have taken a backyard. And therefore now I think even in the AI summit, the focus was on critical minerals mission, 150, $70 million, focusing on that. And I think that's perhaps led to now Ministry of Mines offering things, and they have a complete different perspectives and role of EPR and others, I think. And that poses, I think, a challenge to firms like Deepali and Pranshu's, because now suddenly the policy and how do you account for unanticipated policy shift? That's a challenge when policy shift happen. One of the policy changes on which I would want to now bring in Satish Sinha sir, to talk about that is the role of, during this period, GST got introduced in India. And now suddenly cross-border movement of waste. Now suddenly there is GST. Now, how has GST impacted, the introduction of GST impacted the firm's operations, the management of e-waste in India, and especially what perhaps needs to be done now that we are talking about circular economy and material and others. So, Satish sir, if you can share some perspective on that policy.
My camera is not coming. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So thank you, and thank you for inviting me in this discussion. We just released a report yesterday. I don't know if any of you had a chance to look at it. The report is titled Long Road to Circularity. That's about electronic waste, EPR. We have analyzed the EPR system, and some of the points that Pranshu or Deepali just mentioned, or even Dr. Chatterjee just mentioned, have been adequately reflected in that report. It's been covered by the newspapers also and some other media. All these points are very relevant, and I think we all are aware of many of these points. And none of us understand why these upheavals or this seesaw battle keeps happening with the policy discourse in this country. But before that, I'd like to actually compliment PCI for taking up this initiative to work with women entrepreneurs or creating entrepreneurs of women workers in this country on especially looking at this waste stream. My first point is this policy for the last 15, 20 years, be it whatever it is, it has given rise to more than 400 recyclers and refurbishers that we see in this country. The numbers are more than 400 as on today, with a capacity of more than, 22 or 23 lakh tons per annum, the listed approved capacity that is there on the CPCB portal. Not many of them are women. I can see Deepali here sitting in that group. So she is an entrepreneur, but I don't see too many women. Now, does this policy create a barrier for gender? That's the question that I was asking myself. I don't think that is a gender barrier in this policy. The policy has never created a gender barrier. So why, if it could work out for men, why can't it work out for women? So I think the first thing, this myth about gender had to be demystified. It does not create a barrier for gender. We have a mindset and we say that this is male dominated and this is women dominated. Perhaps we have been conditioned to think like that. So I think that's more of a mindset issue than anything else. Point number two that I want to make in this thing, that you see women across waste stream working. To look at them in textile waste, phenomenal amount of contribution by women. You look at municipal solid waste, phenomenal amount of contribution by women. You look at electronic waste, you may not know about it, but they have extensive role to play as far as dismantling segregation that is happening in this country. If you look at Delhi itself, I think women play a very important role in electronic waste management. And we as an organization, we know them. We are working with many of these people, and they are not only as workers who are working under some umbrella of a male group, that could happen, but they're also working as SHGs. They have they're working as groups. They have formally been converted into SHG or not. So I'm looking at some of the issues that PCI and ABB is looking at, and I'm trying to think from their perspective as to what could be done and where is the possibility. I think the larger issue about policy and all that is both, it is equal to both men and women. Why men can flourish and why women can't flourish in the same regime is something that is beyond my thinking. So what are the challenges in setting up such a system and where does it come? So I also heard that the State Pollution Control Board is in a way sympathetic or has got a understanding to this issue and they're linked. And I think that's a very, very big advantage if you have their support in this. So that is also that I see a positive role for your organization to work in this scale. I think the problem comes in electronic waste management is about many my previous speakers have talked about collection mechanism. That's the big challenge. And for women to become collectors, that's certainly a point that you will have to look at some of the models and collection mechanism that can be done. What kind of technology can aid you? How does technology support you in trying to create those kind of issues? I think volumes, and that is going to be a challenge. That is what I feel. Second thing is that how do you if I say that when you collect, what kind of value addition that can be done? Because that's something for long-term sustainability that becomes very, very evident that just by collection is extremely hard to sustain a system. So there is a lot of thought process in creating value addition to many of these things. How do you automate some of these processes? How do you add mechanize some of these processes? Where do you bring in mechanization? Where do you bring in automation? I think these are some things that need to be very clearly thought of. Very small scale, not very large scale, very small scale automation where 10 people can work on a machine, where small kind of thought process can really help systems add value to many of these things. And I also feel that they need skill development. I think that's something that all of us should be very, very mindful when we work with women entrepreneurs. How do you bring in, what kind of skills do they need? How do you create those kind of skills? And I think when you look at the product and the products that you're talking about, or we all are talking about, is it, how do you create systems like Deepali will be much better to answer this question in the later part when I'm saying this. Many of these products, how can you very easily dismantle it? How could you create those kind of training for these women entrepreneurs about dismantling, about sorting, about segregation? So these people are very capable of doing it. How do you recover some of the metals from here? You might be surprised. I'm talking about basic metals. Look at wires. And computers have got a lot of fine wires, very thin wires, because all the connectors are there. The larger ones are outside the machine, but the smaller, very fine cables and connectors are there inside. How do you process many of these things? That can be done very easily. You just require very small mechanization processes in this. So there is multiple kind of things that women, SHGs, and I'm talking from that point, I'm coming down to that level about SHGs. How can SHGs benefit from many of these thought processes that can be adopted to suit their convenience and to make them more empowered to take on this kind of thing? And that will bring in sustainability. We're talking about GST is a very sad thing that we have a GST regime which charges 18% for environmental good. When you're on one end, you are promoting circularity. On the other end, you are putting 18% GST for it. Is counterproductive. And especially if you're saving the environment, if you're saving energy, if you're looking at extractive industry and you're saying that, well, here is more of material, secondary raw material, which is being produced from here. Why do you need to charge? Because that's saving your extractive industry. That is protecting climate change. That is addressing multiple questions that we are talking about today. So I think these are all, the initial opening points. I can say this, that there's an immense possibility of trying to create entrepreneurs of women, and they would perhaps be, to my mind, they could be as successful or even more successful as compared to male entrepreneurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Satish ji. So the role of focusing on gender, and especially the importance of women across value streams, not just e-waste, but multiple other waste streams and across value chain. I think that's the part. And when you mentioned about the skill, and I think that was one of the things initially when the project started, that was a discussion that we also had. So one, to work on managing e-waste, and then to run an enterprise, it requires different skills. So different competencies need to be developed to work for a firm and to run a firm. So there were some of those issues also, but there was a lot of skills in running a firm, skills in managing e-waste, skills in identifying value in e-waste. And one of our an ongoing conversation that we keep having is, what is the best stage in the value chain for these setups to come? So when the project mandate is to set up 6 women-driven enterprises, it's left to us that where should they come up? Should they be in the collection stage? Should they be in the refurbishment stage? Should they be in, let's say, a pure play trading stage? Should they be in the recycling stage? And I think that's an ongoing conversation. So I think 3 of the enterprises are in the collections essentially stage at different parts of Bangalore, but the other 3 identity are yet to be ascertained. And I think with everything that we have discussed around policies and around some of the challenges, I'll wish to come back to these panelists again to share their perspectives on what stage of the value chain do you think, with all these anticipated and unanticipated risk to a firm, what do you think would be the most appropriate stage in the value chain for them to feature in? As a collector, as a refurbisher, as a collector come refurbisher, as a recycler, or anything else, any other model that, especially knowing that these are SSGs. So how do they come and at what stage of value chain? So maybe Pranshu, Deepali, others, you can just pitch in.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah. So the very first thing, and I like to build on some of our own experiences where we have worked with SHGs, worked with social enterprises, worked with civil society organizations, and not just in one, I would say almost 20 odd states across the country. So one of the big spaces, is for me collection. How do you, because solving the last mile connectivity, and especially in semi-urban and rural areas. So while you have informal sector present in many parts of the country, they are really not that strongly present in rural and semi-urban areas. So we have been trying to tackle that problem by working with civil society organizations, sometimes even financial institutions or microfinance institutions, that can we create an augmented income can we add a new revenue for people who are already working in that space. So the big challenge is, in India, people don't give their waste for free. So they expect a certain amount of money, and that is very high. So, and that comparison is not done to the material present in the product, but it is compared to the actual buying price of the product. Let's take example of a phone. Now, phone, by virtue of the materials present, and we are talking of tiny amount of copper and aluminum and iron and some plastics, and so forth and so forth. The value of a phone from a materials perspective may be at max 40 rupees, 50 rupees. But expectation of a person when they are giving away a phone is, I bought it for 20,000 rupees, at least I should get 2,000. So how does a person, solve this problem? This can only be solved in certain products like an air conditioner, where the material weight is very heavy or the metal weight is very high. So where, you have bought the AC for, let's say, 30,000 rupees, but even as a recycler, you are able to offer 5,000 rupees on that device, which makes the equation work. But it fails for most of the products. And this is a challenge I think PCI team would have evidenced, while they are working at a grassroots level. How do you finance? Now, a collection agent essentially, and I've been in that very tricky situation, gets sandwiched between a person who has the waste and the recycler, because recycler will only pay you for the materials. So how do people make money, and meaningful money? I'm not talking of tiny money, which is not even enough for, basic livelihood. And this money was earlier being financed because of rules. So while, women-based enterprises, and, one of our very first programs when I was at Nokia was with Seva, at a very, very large scheme that we ran with Seva in many cities in Gujarat. But the whole issue was, at that time, it was a voluntary program. We were financing it using our, philanthropic funds. But once the funding stops, the system, dies. So how do you bring sustainability to this becomes a challenge. We are happy to, for example, collaborate with PCI on this and figure some of these, share the learnings, happy to collaborate. But the challenge is how do you bring long-term finance to this? And this is a broken scheme. Either you focus only on a few varieties of products, or you enhance value creation, which means, can I now add repair as a activity post-collection? So can I add component extraction? And again, we don't have a system, a country level system to reuse components, but something of that sort can be created. But it has to be, some more value has to be created at that local end. Otherwise, it's a very challenging thing. Third issue that you will always find, and this is a big known issue, is quality of recycling. While everyone says we are recycler, there are recyclers and there are so-called recyclers. So, there are clear reports. News Laundry thankfully did a fantastic job in pushing this out. They went to almost 50 odd enterprises and found almost 45, 46 being completely default entities ki kaam hi nahi hota wahan kuch. So in a country like this, even if because enforcement is weak, one can, and again, this is not a problem of India. I see this as a global problem, because how much policing can you do on tremendous amount of ways? So one needs to look at innovative solutions like public disclosure, which Satish ji has also alluded in the report that he's mentioning. Unless we look at new ways of throwing light on the subject and bringing transparency, we are unable to solve this. Largely, if I were to talk of role of women at large in our own sort of a system, I think collection is one of the spaces, but primarily in semi-urban, rural, we hardly find women in urban spaces, in the informal enterprises, hardly any. I can't remember even one enterprise led by a women entrepreneur in the informal sector in large cities. Second space where we have found women very, very effective is in the recycling space. So especially when we go after critical raw materials, you have to start opening components to the last mile. So you open a laptop, you have a hard drive inside, you have to then open a hard drive, get deep inside and find two tiny magnets. Now, what we are finding is, or let's talk of a smartwatch where there are two tiny magnets. So for these sort of products, we have found that the women workforce is very patient and does this job very, very diligently. So almost 50-60% of labor today in both the recycling plants that we have is women. And by nature, I would say, the ability to do it in a very thorough way, understand the nature of the job, I think we have found a very good space. So, some of those dismantling as an activity can also be introduced for value chain creation. If we have to bring financial viability. One last point that I like to bring, GST is a huge challenge right now. Almost every GST official that we end up talking to or who reaches out to us, they say don't work with informal. That's the first thing that they tell us. Because informal means for them, untraceable systems. And the reality which is forgotten is जब पहला आदमी कोई घर से वेस्ट खरीद रहा है तो उस पे जीएसटी इनवॉइस नहीं है, कोई इनवॉइस नहीं होती. So at some point in time, it will get converted from a no invoice to an invoice. People should be happy that conversion has happened. What is being, where organizations like us and recyclers also at large get challenged is, you have bought it from this recycler bought it from. So the expectation from GST officials is that we should know the whole value chain. Whereas I have no visibility in the system to go beyond the tier from whom I am buying. So I can ensure compliance is till that end. But beyond that, who is doing what? And because, like, again, it was talked earlier, 18% GST creates such a big incentive for people to cheat. So fake bills laga dete hain, bahut piche value chain mein kahin. So how do you solve these problems? And these are systemic. What happens is organizations like ours or, new enterprises which will get setup will get trapped into these things, and allegations will start coming that you are promoting wrong sort of a trade. No, we are trying to solve and trying to make things inclusive. At one end, government has been continuously saying make things inclusive, and on the other hand, GST department has been saying no, do not work with this, do not work with that, never. So I think these are very common things that all of you would have experienced, but it's important to solve, and I don't know how. I mean, we are struggling for this for last 10 years.
No, thank you so much, Pranshu. Extremely important points. The role of value, the role of this recycling. I think Shruti had a conversation with me because she is the one running around in Bangalore to get license, and then she went around and found and then said, "Oh, all these recyclers I thought were recycling were not actually recycling." And so this is what her own evidence. So forget news laundry report, forget everything else. Her own evidence after running around in Bangalore and getting all of this. And in fact, 2 days back, there was an article in the Economic Times where one of the recycler formal sector has quoted that now 60% of recycling in India is in the formal sector. That their firm has played a part, which again I was wondering that where is this data coming from? 60% move to formal sector, and with everything that we are facing on ground, and how is
I
this?
believe Kalyan is not more than 5%, not
Yeah.
more than 5%.
Kalyan, there in that report, my quote is also there. Majorities are being sorted in informal sector.
Oh, okay. So I looked at the 60% part, but extremely important point about the role of perhaps adding value, and I think perhaps enterprises like this, Shruti, can perhaps coordinate with or feed into larger firms like Karo, Sambhav. I think that's something that we can explore post thing. Deepali, if you can just throw some more light on this, the wastage of value chain with all these challenges.
Sure. So, I think this is something that we started talking already in 2004-5 when we was doing, the initial scoping, that when you're looking at value, the maximum value is captured when a product is functional. So when women are looking at collecting, if they can encourage people to give their products earlier in their, in their life span as such, instead of storing and then forgetting it in a drawer for 10 years, 12 years, you give it when you stop using it, right? Like if you have a phone and you've got a new phone, very unlikely that you go back to your old phone after 2, 3, 4 months, right? So if you can get that product out of the house, out of the drawer faster, then it can be used by somebody else. So getting that out first is giving more value to the product, and it can be used, and that is creating value for person who's collecting it. So that's, I think, the functional value of a product is the highest. The next is the value of the component. I think Pranshu mentioned, the parts and, harvesting kind of components. If you can't, fix the whole product, at least you should be able to extract value from the components. Now, not everything can, if not all components are, replaceable. There are so many SKUs, or like, the different types of components, etc. But there are some that are, valuable, and, you can use them for repairs, you can use them for upgrades, etc. RAMs, hard disks, cameras, a lot of these, right? Um, so yeah, that's capturing that functional value would be the second point in that value chain. How can you repair and reuse the product first, or then capture that functional value from component harvesting, and only then go into recycling, the material recovery side of it. And even in the material recovery, I think there is, in India, I feel, this is my personal view, and there is also some science back to it, but there is this obsession, like you have to have big shredders, you need to have big separators, big machines, to be a recycler. Though actually there is evidence even from the UK where they've said that to extract the best quality and the, especially critical minerals that, we all are so excited about, you do need to do manual dismantling. That is the best way to get the best quality in the safest way. So you don't have so much of, hazardous dust flowing around. You don't have, everything getting contaminated and then using a lot of energy, a lot of resources to again extract it and decontaminate, right? So the best way is to use this, to do this manually. I think hard disk, that is a great example that Pranshu gave, right? And we've done this as well, where we are able to get that, 1 gram of neodymium magnet, which is stuck in that hard disk, which is what everybody wants to go after. If you put it in a shredder, impossible. There is absolutely zero chance that you can recover that magnet, right? So can women enterprises really do these kind of high value addition, dismantling, where you can capture value, because nobody else is able to do that in the value chain. And everyone wants to do it in a machine, but there is value loss versus value capture. I think,
I
yeah,
think
maybe
this,
that's a starting thought that I can leave you with.
no, extremely useful. The value loss, value capture, and I think now that since we are in the initial stages, and I think we are just building that capacity, I think this will be extremely useful for getting the right sort of women there and I think right sort of resources for these enterprises. But since this thing of informal sector has come up again, the informal sector role and engaging with them and the role of value, I think let me bring in Priyanka here. Priyanka, you have been in multiple, again, donning hats at GIZ, at Ministry, with Fametrics, now at your own firm. I think now that you look at, let's say, your own decades of journey here, this informal formal sector, what do you think has changed over time, or has this relationship become more fraught, more challenging, or is there a way for there to be some sort of a collaboration between the two and not just competition between the two?
Actually, first, good afternoon, everyone. And it's I'm thankful to PCI and Professor Kalyan for inviting me in the panel. If I talk about my journey, I have started in 2012. So the rule was initiated, rule was framed, and it was notified. That time collection centers were introduced. And through GIZ and the European Union project, we have set up few collection centers in 4 cities. Then policy changed, as Satish also mentioned and Pranshu also mentioned about how policy has been changing in few years. Then collection center, then the trust building, which we have developed with informal actors, and we set up, we formalized them, we got the license for them. Now, these are not sustainable and they are not collecting any formally. These all informal sector which were formalized, they are again working as an informal sector because they are not getting business through formalization. One issue is this. Second, then EPR introduced. So through EPR, many of the recyclers, they authorized, and there was a time when more than 500 recyclers in the country. Then after EPR, then this EPR credit system came and all. So my point is here, either you consult or study, the ground study is required. Whosoever working in the ground, they are facing challenge. If I convince informal actors to formalize, then they again tell a story that formalization is a not good business. And we are doing this through the cluster program. We are doing in 16 cities now. And it is a METIS program. Now come to the skill development. For skill development, infrastructure is required. If we talk about refurbishment, where is the infrastructure? If we talk about dismantling and sorting of e-waste, where is the infrastructure? Only 2 labs we have set up through METIS program in Northeast and Punjab with Punjab University. But to create skills, we need infrastructure, we need training centers like this. As a private entity and as an individual, Deepali has set up one infrastructure, which is in Ghaziabad. So one infrastructure is required. Second, for refurbishment, we are talking about skill development training. But for refurbishment, where is the content? What is the training material we should teach them? Where is the infrastructure? We should teach how to refurbish the product. So although these are the, we are trying to talk about the functional value of the product, but there is a long way to go. So the alignment with the right to repair, the alignment with the digital inclusion, traceability, circular economy goals, we can achieve this in 10 years, but currently there is no scope. We can evolve them, but currently there is no scope for developing skills, creating infrastructure that is required. And my ask is from the government, from the policy side also, to frame such model for these entrepreneurs where they can develop a skill, they can collect the material, there should be digital traceability so that they can get a fair value of the product from consumers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Priyanka, for sharing that. In fact, when you mentioned about the role of skill, sitting from an academic institute, one way which I look at e-waste management in India, that India is the only country in the world where you have a mandate for CSR, you have a mandate for EPR, and it also aligns with SDGs. For example, if we were to talk about e-waste management, now SDG 12 is around responsible consumption and production. E-waste management, you can connect with that. E-waste management can also be connected with SDG 12 on decent work and economic growth, especially when it talks about informal sector, SDG 11 sustainable cities and communities. So from a company perspective, it makes sense perhaps that one can make an argument. I know of companies in India in automobile sector who pursue a strategic CSR. So what they do, so they tie up with ITIs, impart skills to workers. And tomorrow, some of those workers can set up their own garages or let's say come and join those firms. And if they join their firm, the employee cost goes down. If they run those garages, they might have a soft corner for this firm. And these are benefits in which you can channelize CSR in a manner that also benefits the firm. So let's say skill development is one of those eligible CSR activities in India. So if firms can channelize their money on skill development, it helps them meet their CSR objectives, but it can also help meet their EPR objectives also tomorrow. So I think so that's how I see it here. But with the challenges that you're bringing out, and I think I'll just go to Priti. I think Priti, if you can just share your own perspective of this informal, formal linkages and these potential, how it has changed, and do you see what role in the informal sector in the current policy regime that has completely changed for that, and perhaps for these enterprises to engage with them. Priti, if you can share something.
Thanks, Kalyan, and thank you for inviting me to this important discussion because, I've been obviously working on this issue for now almost 2 decades, but, the role of women worker or women-led enterprises has been very limited discussion. So I think it's a very, very important transition. And that also shows how far the whole issue has moved forward in the last 10 years, more than 10 years of the regulation that we are now talking about, kind of a little more mature inclusion, of bringing in those inclusion. Some of the discussion which has happened before, I'm speaking, I think I'll just put in a couple of points which, I want to add. One is on the policy discussion, which you kind of initiated initially, Kalyan. And I do feel that policy stability is very, very essential when we're talking about grassroots investment. So the frequent rule changes, I think that increases the perceived risk. And especially when we're talking about women-led SHGs, because a lot of time they are, kind of deploying collective savings. So now these are additional, savings that they have. They try and invest that when they are looking at, setting up these SHGs. So for them, a policy stability becomes very, very important because every time the rule changes, they can't really, kind of function out of that. So, these whole government-backed guarantees or long-term offtakes agreement with producers are very, very important when we're talking about, women-led SCGs or enterprises when we're talking about e-waste. Similarly, you did speak about GST, and I think it's very, very important there as well that we are looking at, causing something which is kind of, I think it's a GST differential does distort, I think, competition. I think it's very important to understand, because the informal buyers are, paying cash, they're avoiding GST, and that's why they are able to offer higher upfront prices. And that when we are trying to compete with SHGs, when we are talking about conversions and formalizations, or at least moving in these semi-formal spaces, when they have to pay GST and pay these compliance norm cost, and have also be facing these paperwork burdens which GST brings in, I think it is a big barrier. So if we want women to formalize, we cannot penalize them for compliance. We have to have fiscal reforms like, kind of GST rationalizations or reverse, kind of charge mechanisms to level the field. So I think it's very important when we are talking about. Another point which was raised about was skills. So I think we have to see this in, kind of perspective. Uh, uh, it is, we are talking about formalizing women, but I think we have to see the kind of jobs or work which has been assigned to women workers over the years. It has been usually very, very menial jobs. We are looking at, kind of taking out paints or stripping the wires. So there's been very, very, non-technical work or very, very, simpler work that has been assigned to them, which means also a pay, kind of disbalance. They get poorly paid in these streams. Or a lot of time they're working as a family, and that's again something where they don't really get those incomes directly themselves, because it's kind of family and the men tend to get the work. So I think this whole changing the perspective that women cannot do a lot of these technical work. I think that's the perception which I got when I was working in the field, that they can be used for some simpler jobs, but not really employed for proper dismantlings or, kind of any repair or refurbishing or, recycling. So I think those bits need to change, and that will happen only with skill development and capacity building. I think there is a huge space for repair and refurbishment in the emerging market. Not just that it's environment friendly, but it kinds of creates job. And I think that's where I think women need to be trained and women need to be employed. So I think this whole integration, when we are talking about, we should have something like, kind of, I think a lot of speaker before me spoke about also cannibalization. And remember Deepali also stressing, kind of that point. I think there is a very, very important to put in a component data bank, because there is a lot of potential for repair and refurbishment, because people are looking for it. Unfortunately, most of the time, people like me, when we try to get things repaired, the answer we get is that those components are no longer available. So I think this whole harvesting of components and creating a bank of it, I think it's a big step where we could move the whole environment compliance as well. And I think one important bit we need to look at when we are talking about this whole conversion or formalization, that inclusive e-waste is not just about diverting waste from landfill. It is about diverting women from a precarious job into ownership. So I think that's a very, very important bit that we need to look at, and we need to design a system not for just material recovery, because if we do that, then we'll miss the opportunity for social recovery. So I think circular economy has to be not just about the material, but also about the people, circular for people. So I think this whole, kind of when we are looking at this transition that is happening from informal to formal, we're missing that social inclusion part completely. It's been at the periphery and there has been some focus, but I think that is not part of the circular kind of conversion that we are looking at. And I think it's very, very important to bring in that, because only then we'll have also more material recovery. Because I think Deepali again mentioned that, and I think Priyanka also mentioned that, that manual restorations is something which has greater inclusion potential. It will, kind of, though it requires skill, it has kind of more possibility of more jobs per ton, and also greater inclusion potential, and also higher social value. So I think that's has to be core, higher social value, along with environment. So I think that's something needs to be looked at from a just transition lens, and looked at from a livelihood security point of view, and not really from just a business making venture. So I think that those are bits that I would like to mention at this point.
No, great, fascinating nuances. And I think it just displays your insights working with women at different stages, and perhaps now, and that's, I think ABB role was to have women, not just any enterprises managing e-waste, but essentially involving women at various stages. So extremely helpful. I think we'll be in touch with you for more. But now let me go to Anwesha. As someone who has seen the Indian landscape, but someone who is now closely observing the European landscape. And now Europe, you have a right to repair. Europe, there is also the push of Green New Deal, push towards circular economy. And the first region in the world where EPR was introduced. And now we have a quarter of a century experience there, more than 25, 26 years of experience there. So what conversations do you find yourself surrounded with, Anwesha, there? And when you compare and contrast with what's happening in India, especially what you've heard so far, what are your thoughts and takeaways?
Yeah, thank you, Kalyan. And it is such an enlightening talks all over conversations. And I have actually a lot of questions to the panelists, but we can come to that later. In Europe, as you said, European Union was the pioneer in e-waste policy making. And in India, in the beginning years, took a lot of inspiration from the WE Directive, European Union's Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Directive. But here too, I see a lot of commonalities with India in terms of small electronic equipments, which actually now constitute almost 50% of the overall e-waste generation. If you consider small equipments plus IT equipments plus the lamps, then it is almost 50% of the global e-waste generation at the moment. In Europe too, they are struggling with getting those smaller equipments collected for recycling. The IT equipments like, small mobile phones, smartphones, and other small electronic equipments are still stored in European households, which is very common to the Indian landscape as well. In Europe, on one hand, they have some very good initiatives. Like I was in Belgium before coming to Germany, and in Belgium, they have this organization called Recupel, which is responsible for diverting a lot of electronic waste from the landfills. So Recupel has been in our university campus, for instance, where your privacy and everything could be ensured while you dispose of your mobile phone or a laptop, for instance. So they do have this kind of initiatives, but we must also acknowledge the fact that still Europe sends a lot of e-waste to the global south. It is a reality in the name of donation, in the name of working equipment. I have recently started working on textile waste, not recently, probably since the past 2 years. And last year I went to South Africa, and they also said that a lot of textile waste from the EU lands there. So the trade of waste is very common here. But as you say, they have these rules such as now right to repair, which we already practice in India, I would say. In Delhi, for instance, the people who comes for repairing your pressure cooker or sharpening of your knife, those kind of things are quite common in many parts of our country, including in big Indian cities. So I would like to argue that we do have some kind of a circular system already in place in our countries. And we should actually probably encourage those systems where we do not really throw away anything, be it electronics or any other products, just like that. We try to extend the lifespan, and it's still there, surprisingly. While we see that, like the generation is increasing, people are using a lot of electronic products, but we are still holding on to some of the traditional core values that we have, especially with probably electronic equipment changing hands several times in smaller Indian cities or towns or the rural areas before really going for recycling. So if we can encourage those kind of things, then I think we will be in a better position in the context of e-waste recycling. Yeah, that's from my side. Like in Europe, they still have problems, and many of their problems are actually covered because they still trade waste.
Yeah, I think I remember a few years back, Europe had launched a new project called Prosum, where they wanted to make a continent level tracking of material flow, right from the production to part, essentially to build that urban mining platform. But I think there are those challenges, as you say, those leaks and gaps. But these it is days like these when you wish the conversations keep going on. But now that I look at the bottom part of my screen where the clock is ticking, so I'll come towards the last point of today's discussion, and I'll invite all panelists to share their quick take. The question which is important to the project from PCI and ABB perspective: how do we ensure longevity of this intervention? The objective is CSR money is currently flowing, things are happening, enterprises will be set up. What should happen so that when the CSR funds stop, when the project funding stops, these women enterprises are able to stand up on their feet and they survive, they don't die down. So what should we do? What should we plan, consider right now, based on your experience and whatever we have discussed? So quick last takeaway, and this will be the last takeaway, and then we'll move to the summary of the discussions. So if I can start with you, Pranshu, if you can just share a quick takeaway.
So, thank you. Most difficult part. So again, I haven't found an answer. The whole idea of EPR being introduced was to finance, such initiatives. And with EPR not really working in the direction that we all wanted it to work, very, very difficult. The only thing that I have found, and this is, and I'm building on the initiative that we have created with many partner organizations across the country, what we are finding is that this should not be the only source of income. We need to look at collection as an additional to some other activities. So let's say if women are already engaged in some other initiative, let's say a microfinance organization, for a part-time work. So this can only give, it has to be looked at as an additional income stream, because with the, the market has completely broken down. I mean, this is not going to work on its own. Hence the need for regulation. So honestly, I don't really have a clear reply, because we are ourselves struggling in making systems that we had created till now functional on a day-to-day basis. Another thing which could, really work is if leave out CSR. If large brands, one is providing support from an EPR point of view, but if they start working with the right recyclers, what we find is most of the large brands do not work with the right recycler. They also look at who's going to pay the highest amount of money, and that's it. After that, all you need is a CPCB license and the highest amount of money. No one is looking at what kind of social initiatives these organizations are running. What are they doing? Are they, setting up deep collection systems? Do they have, do they even have research programs? So what happens is any recycler, so-called recycler, which has nothing, no spending, is able to offer the highest price. And he ends up taking all the waste. So any support that could have come to, do even marginal finance is lost. So no one, we have been suffering, and I'll take example from an auction which was just done by one of the largest companies in India. I'm not going to name them. The price that was offered by someone was at least 3 times the recycled content value. I don't know how does this even happen. And we see this in auctions after auctions, that if the material value, and I'm really saying scientific material value of a product is 100, in auction the product is being sold for 300. I have really failed to understand how does this happen, because this is not refurbishment. The brands are asking a guarantee that these products would be recycled, and if the material value is not there, how is this happening? So somewhere, if not CSR, producers have to, or bulk consumers or people who are generating very large amount of waste have to rethink what are we doing with this waste. Yes, ask for money, but be reasonable, understand what's the true material value, and ask that material value. No one can give you more money, and if they are giving you more money, then something is off.
Thank you so much, Pranshu. I think it will really help us design and the sustenance of these forms. So Sandip sir, if I can come to you, a quick takeaway on this.
I am thinking in a different direction, because due to the shortage of critical mineral, the day will come that manufacturers, OEM, will be facing challenges to develop their own product. So ownership of the entire value chain from the OEM would be important. And whatever just now Pranshu said, I am extending this point. So aligning with right recyclers, a good take back mechanism in the whole system, and instead of discussing US management, we should transform to ITAD, IT asset disposal, where the value of each site, like component harvesting, reusing the chip in another component, all those things will play critical role for the OEM, because as you know, we do not have actual recycling technology to take back all the elements are presently we are using in the smart digital device. So component harvesting is a solution, and there I think it would be important to ownership the entire end of life product cycle by the OEM would be the important step. Then the policy, whatever we have now in the country, will be also effective.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandip. So the ITAT model is pretty new and interesting for us to consider, and the future looking at the role of critical minerals for producers. And I think since these enterprises are set up in Bangalore, where a lot of those producers are there, I think those convergence synergies are there, certainly. Deepali, if you can share your points on the intervention.
Sure, I did put them in the chat already, but
you did.
I think the experience that we've had in actually trying to build this kind of a social enterprise and what would be making it sustainable and long term. One is that you need like the offtake guarantees, right? Whatever materials they collect, whatever materials they handle, you need someone to then take that and pay for that, right? And having those vendors, having those compliant downstream treatment providers is very important. And if you can have those offtake guarantees, then it gives the confidence and it also gives the cash flow. So that's really important, I think, from a very operational perspective. I think having these partnerships with urban local bodies to reduce the OPEX, instead of having to, have the burden of a rent and, all of those things, if the ULB can be partnered for providing some of that space, or other organizations also, right? Not just ULBs, but ULBs have the mandate to now, especially under the new SWM. How can that be, complementing their other waste kind of activities? And it really helps to reduce that OPEX to the minimum. So I think that's one of the other aspects around sustainability that should be considered. I think this idea that it should be just self-sustainable in like a business context might be something to also challenge, right? Like, can it be seen as a compliance service for CSR compliance? Because CSR is also a compulsory compliance. As companies are, increasing their profits, also their CSR budgets have to, naturally going to grow, keeping that 2% in mind. So, and there are companies looking for partners which have real impact, which have good process, which have good governance. How can this be set up in that kind of a context to be a compliance service for CSR? Forget EPR. EPR is completely broken. It's completely dodgy. Let's not go down that route. But CSR, there is genuine, work that is being financed through it. So can this be one of those? And I think the fourth point that I mentioned, and it kind of links to the first one, is having localized value chains, because you need the upstream and the downstream to be as local as possible, right? Because that's where you can reduce this cost of transport, cost of packaging, etc., risk of movement, all these GST headaches. If it's in that same city, in the same area, you have a lot less than if you have to transport it long distances. So these are 4 ways to reduce risk and increase sustainability, I would say.
Yeah, I think the CSR as a compliance service is really fascinating, and I think with Dhenuka ji, we'll certainly have discussions on this for the sustenance of these enterprises. Really, really fascinating. Now, if I can come to you, Satish sir, if you can, Satish ji, you can share insights.
No, I think there's a lot of insight already on the table. I think as far the policy goes, none of us are in a position to actually make a comment on it as to what needs to be done. But I just had a question for everyone. Everybody talked about 18% is not the right kind of, GST, this thing. What should be the GST? Should it be 0 or should it be 5? The lowest slab is 5 or 12. What should be the GST for e-waste? I think if that be known, there are people like us who can take up with the government, with the Niti Aayog, with other people, we can write and press this point as to what should be the GST for e-waste. That's one important, because all of you are here, so I'm just raising this question. So that's one thing that it'll be interesting to do and look at it. Second point that I just wanted to make is, well, there will be challenges, and sustainability is the thing that we all look forward to, because if the business venture doesn't become sustainable, either you call it a social venture or you talk anything else, the name that you give. But if you're looking at a business opportunity, making a business case out of it, it has to be sustainable at the end of the day. Even so, I think there are 2 or 3 things that I see from because it is CSR effort at this point of time. And I think two things that can be really taken care is, one is the capex. What is the capex that you need to put up in this business venture? Is it possible to come from CSR? Because that's one big advantage that you have when you look at formalizing this structure. And because otherwise for SAG Group to become formal and to start looking at business venture is the most difficult thing. Perhaps you can't do it. So if the capex comes in as CSR component of it, skilling comes in as CSR component of it, I think you are much better placed as far as these 2 components are concerned. And I think the operations or the processes that are required to be undertaken in this, that is an ongoing thing. And you will have to keep evolving as newer kinds of products come in and newer kinds of material come in. You will have newer kinds of material. And as I think one of the points that Dr. Chatterjee made is about critical minerals and ownership of product and how does it move forward. Yes, that's a long distance thing. It will start to happen maybe another 5-10 years. But at this point of time, I would only say that skilling, refurbishment, value addition, I think these are absolutely critical. If you want to sustain in this business, I think you need to diversify a little bit. You can't have the same verticals that we all have been talking about, and just collection won't do. So the verticals have to shift as to, you talk about component salvaging or making banks of components, look at refurbishments, look at higher quality of refurbishments or repairs. Why refurbishment alone? Repairs is another thing that you can look at it. And these are all possible. People do create profitable or sustainable business out of repair also. How many garages in India are not, they're basically repair agencies. How do they become sustainable? So look at electronic waste and electrical waste. Can it become a sustainable venture or not? Can refurbishment become sustainable venture or not? Because the margin of profits are much higher when you look at refurbishments. And there are many people who are doing refurbishment, but they are into informal kind of setup. But formal setups have also come up in this country who are into refurbishments. So I think it is skilling, it is about your value addition, and it is diversification. I think if you focus on these 3 things, it should work out at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Satish ji. On your first point, I think what should be the ideal GST rate? I think Deepali has given a brilliant reply on the chat box. But since we mentioned,
we all look for that. But if there is a negotiation or there's a point that they say, no, after all, businesses are making money, they are doing this. Because after all, 400 people haven't come day before yesterday. They have grown. And 400 are there, and their total look at values that these companies have. Some of them might be putting up IPOs tomorrow. I don't know. So you can't just tell the government that you have no business to charge me anything.
No, I think what you have done is you have given us a very fascinating cue for the next workshop. Next workshop that we're going to have towards the end, which will result in a policy brief. We are going to come out with a policy brief after that, and that will be a policy-focused workshop where we are going to start with the first question would be ideal GST rate, where it would be based on, again, economic logic, something that can help us engage, make a case with the government, and using data and figures. And by that time, we would have had data from this project itself to substantiate some of those claims that we'll be making.
Absolutely.
So we'll start with that. So thank you so much, Satish ji. If I can come to you now, Priyanka, if you can just share your key takeaway finally on the sustenance of this, as GIZ also had funded a lot of those projects. Now, how many of those survive today? And what should happen perhaps here? Any last quick takeaways? On the paucity of time, we'll have to make it quite quick.
Yes, for the sustainability, I would say skilling, create functional value of the product, and CSR should act as a catalyst. So they should be engaged in the skilling development, capacity building, etc. And they should create a model for revenue generation model, not CSR model for these entrepreneurs. So service fee agreement with the bulk consumers or with the brands that can be initiated so that they can generate revenue through collecting the electronic waste or any kind of waste. And then refurbishment skilling can be create a functional value for these women entrepreneurs. So these are the my input for these entrepreneurs. SHGs.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Thank you so much. Priti, how do these enterprises survive?
Yeah, I think I'll probably reiterate some of the points already raised because I think it's very important to realize in a very, very, kind of market which is very, very flexible and the market prices change. So if you're looking at only, kind of, for example, copper extraction or precious metal, then we are also a lot more dependent on the market being fluctuating. So I think that's very important to diversify the material when we are talking about and diversify the jobs. And that's where, I'll also again bring in the point that I raised earlier about repair and refurbishment, because I think that's something which is much more steady. Especially when we are talking about something in Indian context, I think it's a much more steady source of income, and it's something which will not so, dependent on the market prices. So it is something which is, will not fluctuate so much. So I would, when we are talking about, grant independence, I mean, that's something which I would say, because, I've been part of various projects and I've always seen, these kinds of integration and these kind of, inclusive efforts failing as soon as the grant period gets over. So if we are looking at kind of grant survival to kind of independence of these units, we are looking, I think, in maybe 3 or 4 stage pathway. And I think the first bit would be the grant support capacity building and not really go beyond that. So I think it's more should be focused on skill development, whether we are talking about repair, refurbishment, dismantling. And I think it's stage 2, the grant period should focus on ensuring guaranteed procurement partnership for longer period. So I think that's very important again when we are looking at long-term survival of these units. And then the stage 3 could be about market diversification, and like Priyanka spoke about, service contracts and things like that. So I think there has to be these stages. Otherwise, the self-reliance becomes completely non-functional. So I think that we have seen. So I think the turning point in this is predictable demand. So if there is something which you can ensure for future, then I think it's possible for enterprises to survive. Without assured, offtakes, no enterprises stabilizes. So I think that has to be ensured when we're talking about grants and kind of these CSR events, because we've seen that economic independence is very, very key when we talk about any waste management and also in e-waste. And we've seen how material has changed over the last 20 years. I mean, there was so much silver, gold in 2003 and 4. It's reduced substantially. And with the products getting smaller and smaller, there's not much material to recover or recycle. So we have to look at other venues like refurbishment and repair. So I think that's where the focus needs to be.
Yes, the material chemistry. We might be talking about e-waste as a entity, but essentially it's the material within e-waste that derives the value. And if the material itself has gone through a change, as you correctly pointed out, then and these are all those business risks business risk from a grant perspective, the policy perspective, the material perspective. And I think that makes it even more dynamic. These firms have to be more agile. So thank you so much, Priti, for that. And finally, to you, Anwesha. So what do we do? These firms survive, and we don't talk about them in past sense, but they continue to thrive.
Yeah, my takeaway would be, as some of my previous panelists already said, a focus on repair and refurbishment, because that's something we Indians tend to do as compared to many Western societies, which are really now a kind of throwaway societies. So we are still not there yet, even in urban India. So I would say we should focus on capitalizing the repair and refurbishment culture that we already have in our country. Another thing that I was thinking about in this whole conversation is also focus on the other parts of India beyond the urban India, so-called, because like I come from a Himalayan state in Northeast India. My husband is from Jammu and Kashmir. So we always see that how the e-waste and the use of electronics are increasing drastically in those parts as well. So e-waste is no longer a city problem in India anymore. E-waste is generated highly in other parts of the country as well, in many remote parts. So in the whole conversation, I was actually thinking about the ASHA workers, who actually bridge that last mile between the health and the villagers. So women-led enterprises probably take hints from how those people work, and take hints from their work and try to situate it in their own context. So that's something I was thinking about in the whole conversation. I would say overall, we have to move beyond taking inspiration from the European Union or the global north. We have an entirely different socio-political, economic, environmental conditions in India. We have to consider that and make our policies very local specific.
No, beautifully brought out that point, and I think now that you have been in both world, India and part, and I think you can bring out the nuances of Indians of not throwing it away, repairing, recycling. So thank you so much. I think thank you. I cannot have enough words to thank you for sharing all your insights. We will be in touch with you separately also beyond this workshop for getting more cues on some of these things as we go, and we'll be sharing details about our projects, our work with you, and we hope to have continue this conversation with you again. So Ritika, if you can just quickly give a quick summary, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, sir. So thank you everyone to sharing your insight. It was very engaging, very practical, and something we can take it from theory to impact. My key takeaways from this was first that definitely the GST, which is a key blocker and issue right now at this sector, and we need to have a more better discussion, better understanding of this idea. Then Pranshu sir has mentioned very clearly that we need to collaborate more about figuring out the solutions where it is not only depending on one service that such SSGs can have to provide. What other collaboration, what other permutation combination of services that they can do it, not only being an collection unit but a combination of other in the same value chain. The other team needs to understand that this women-led enterprises should be positioned in the value chain, whether in refurbishment, dismantling, component harvesting, or recycling stage, which is dependent on two key factors. First is skilling, training, capacity building, and the third is the infrastructure. What infrastructure capability can be given to them so that it's a long-term tenure, and how can we automate the training of the existing SHG women and also the upcoming women in the same domain would be the key factor. And definitely, as many of the speakers have mentioned, that we need to take up partnership development, be it for the guarantees, compliant downstream treatment providers, or the partnerships with the urban local bodies to reduce the operational expenses. So as of now, these were my key takeaways. Over to you, Kalyan sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ritika, for beautifully summing it up. So Shruti,
Yeah.
finally, let's wrap it up.
Yeah. Yeah, I may be a bit biased, but I think this was one of the most insightful conversations I've heard in a while, and I was so engaged, and my notebook is full. So thank you so much for all the thing, and I can speak on behalf of everybody here. I think we came in with a lot of curiosity and questions, and as we come close to the end, I think we have more questions, but also answers and an understanding of where to kind of go and where to look at. And I think as all of us witnessed, we heard voices from across the e-waste ecosystem, ranging from the firm floor to policy corridors, research labs, I think civil society also. And we're really grateful, I think, to witness this opportunity that all of us came together and expressed a willingness to talk about this complex problem. I think to our panelists, Dr. Anwesha, Ms. Priti, Mr. Sandip Chatterjee, Ms. Dhenuka, Karnan sir, Ms. Priyanka, Mr. Pranshu, Ms. Deepali, and Mr. Satish, thank you so much. I think your honesty and candor is what this discussion needed, and we're really grateful that we got together for that. And to Kalyan sir and Ritika, I think facilitating a discussion with this kind of intellectual architecture that covers ground realities and strategic insight. I don't know if anybody else could have done it, so thank you. And of course, to every participant who stayed engaged, commented on the chat box, or simply listened, whether you like it or not, now you're in this with us and you're part of this effort right now. And for those of you who are in Bangalore, if you have e-waste, write to us. Dispose your e-waste responsibly. And as Ms. Deepali said, when you decide to change your gadgets, throw your, dispose your e-waste timely. And if you have the time, we would love to invite you to come and visit our women entrepreneurs and see the work that they're doing across the city. And we learn and collaborate together. And as lastly, while I'm ranting, I'll just quickly also say that all the insights and recommendations that have come in today and the upcoming stakeholder consultation that we will do later will shape into a white paper. And beyond just the document, we hope to test some of these insights with the 250 women that we are working, particularly around, I think, repairability and refurbishment is an area that we hope to explore. And we promise to carry this responsibility forward, and we will share all of our learnings with you. We have a lot of work to do, and we're very, very glad to be doing it with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Fantastic session. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Bye. Have a good day.